All right, you guys, welcome to part 5. I think I promised before we were going to work on my ore processing, or not work on it. I was going to show you guys what I did for ore processing. So here it is. Bam, beautiful. This chunk, all ore processing. But wait, Viral, where are all the ores? Well, I turned them off because I was getting too many. In this skyblock pack, you get too many ores. So let me just turn these on again, and I'll go into detail what is going on for each one. So, bam. What you see here are two 5x5 sieves. I separated by the sieve content that you put in. So gravel has a lot of different outputs. I think that it's I don't even know. I want to say it's 55 just for gravel alone. As you can see here for gravel, these are all efficiency. It's hard to see, but as you can see, these are all efficiency 5, fortune 3. I made sure there was no luck of the sea. I did not want to deal with fish in this output setup. Two things. You probably might be wondering, why don't I add more water wheels? Once again, I already have way more than enough content, especially when you enchant these things with efficiency 5, fortune 3. I didn't know what to deal with all of them. So that's why I didn't add more water wheels. Second, why don't I just use the electric sifters as I'm seen done using here with crushed endstone? Well, for the first part, I did this as a legacy setup, so I didn't really feel the need to upgrade to, electric sifting, even though it would have compacted it. Plus, I just really like the look of it, right? Just seeing the water just fly through. And I know I can put chests on top of each. I didn't like the look of that. I just like the vanilla automation of a water being picked up. And it doesn't even use that much lag, because now that it's on, before at a stable rate, my base, the control rate was around 16 TPS. This is going to about 18 TPS, and that's with this omnidirectional hopper constantly feeding into these item ducts. So it was a little bit hidden over here, but there's a trash can all the way in the back with a resonant filter. As you can see, I'm voiding about half of, well, not half, I'm voiding about a solid 1/3 of the byproducts, because from sifting gravel, because you just don't need them. You have so much redundancy. Why do you need malachite ore? Why do you need malachite ore? Why do you need chalcopyrite? Why do you need copper? They all smelt down to copper anyway, and you don't really care about the byproducts. And which brings me to difference number 3, because I talked about earlier in difference number 3 between skyblock versus normal GregTech in-world. So when you find a normal vein, it'll have like majority chalcopyrite, and then some pyrite, and then some iron, and then some copper, right? What you can do is you can actually maximize in normal GregTech, right? You would build your machines to maximize the byproducts from those ores, because no one likes mining anyway. But in here, because you have such a huge flush of resources, you're not really incentivized to do that much. Second of all, this is a hopper, and this is a pneumatic craft hopper. The main reason why I chose to use this over annihilation planes is because this can actually be faster than annihilation planes. Second of all, annihilation planes insert directly into an ME system, and they don't have as large of a filter or as a flexible filter as using resonant filters and feeding into item ducts. That's the main reason why I didn't choose them, because I can just trash them and I don't even have to worry about the trash byproducts entering the system in the first place. Right, so I have two filters here. One that's going to allow, one that blacklists stuff, so it doesn't go into my system with the interface, and another one that whitelists into a trash can in the back. In fact, it could be the same process here, right? So let me go get an item duct, and let me turn on this whole entire process again, and these machines can start running, right? So same thing with the sand, and in fact, here's another thing I want to make a note of when I did the ore processing with the sand. I have no string meshes, because when I was actually looking at the string mesh for sieving and sand, actually let's just do sand instead. When I was sieving sand with string mesh, I realized these are all aside from cocoa beans. Oh no, I'm missing out on my cocoa beans. But all of these were entirely redundant with string mesh or steel mesh with gravel. So I was just like, I'm just gonna ignore string. I'm gonna focus on aluminum and tin alloy and steel. So that's eventually what I did. The same thing too. These are all enchanted for the most part. And then lastly, I have this last part here, which is also sieving. It's a 3x3 just because at this point I didn't want to make another 5x5. I think it took up too much space for dust. Same exact thing. You're not missing a lot. Literally all my dust that's being sieved is aluminum steel meshes, right? Because aluminum only gives you skystone dust and tin alloy only gives you skystone dust. So these are all steel. That's about it, really. This one feeds directly into my ME system because there's nothing to filter. But as you can see here, sand also has a pretty large filter, almost maxed it out, right, with resonant filters. These are the ones blacklist from entering, so they'll go inside a trash can in the back here. That's kind of hard to see, but I just tucked it under to give it a nice compact thing. Now, what's nice is that these are both powered by 3 forge hammers, right? Because you have one forge hammer from a cobblestone generator. So this is pulling out cobble into a forge hammer, which double hammers it twice, and then it auto outputs into an item duct that'll go into the auto sifter that's below the 5x5 of these sieves. Not really much of a GregTech thing, more of an ex nihilo thing. Other things I want to talk about is that adding more water wheels does make it go faster. Duh, should have clarified. Enchanting it also makes it go faster, and adding fortune also increases the amount of drops you get from percentage chances. Now, since I mentioned percentage chances, you get bonus points if you remember that. Remember, when you overclock things with GregTech, you also get a bonus in percentage chances. So the main reason why I decided to use Endstone was because Endstone at the time was kind of expensive to make. It cost a bucket of deuterium to make per Endstone. In fact, if I can just find it, here we go. It costs a bucket of deuterium to make per endstone. That was like a lot of processing at the time, right? Because in order to get deuterium buckets, you needed to actually centrifuge hydrogen, which you get from electrolyzing water. I was just like, I don't want to burn through all my deuterium right away, or I want to maximize the uses. So that's why you use this electric sieve. So even though this is enchanted, this does nothing. This does nothing in an electric sieve. I really want to clarify that. I just had extra aluminum meshes on hand, which is why I used it. The real big bonus, though, is that this is an Advanced Electric Sieve 3. So that's an EV, Extreme Voltage Electric Sieve, right? So that means this process at LV kind of gets overclocked. So my endstone, let's see if I can find some rare stuff that I want to sieve for. Right here, right? So I have an aluminum mesh in it. I want to get Ender Naquita ore. Actually, that's high. Let's look for something more rarer, kind of something like enriched Naquita ore, right? Or do I have iridium ore here? Or Ender Tungstate ore chunks? 1%, 4%. That's at LV. If I take the calculator out again and do the math, if it's at 4% at LV, it will be, oopsies, 8%, right, at MV, 16% at HV, 32% at EV. So it works out really well for me to just use EV because I can just increase the amount of enriched Naquita ore that I get per endstone. And that's why I decided to use that. Yeah, that's about it. So if you wonder why I have this random drawer controller with an import bus, is because throughout the pack, I needed to transfer large amounts. Let's just say it was into the pack, into my system. So instead of just manually, right-clicking the drawer and, opening up my wireless crafting terminal and shift right-clicking it in, it was actually just easier to have this drawer controller here, and I'll place a drawer on it and come back later, it'll be done. And if I can move like 20 drawers at once, it'll be the same thing. I highly recommend you have some physical input-output you can use into the world. That's easy and convenient for you. This is my Netherrack one. I didn't make an automated lava setup, even though that's like blasphemy to most skyblocks. I just felt like I've done that before. I wanted to try to see if I can just get through this pack without automated lava. And yeah, that's pretty much what I did. But this just inserts redstone because when you combine redstone with lava, you get netherrack. So this is the netherrack sieving area. And you do need netherrack sieving for one big material that gets kind of annoying is sphalerite. You also need it for nether quartz, but all the other ones cannot exist and it wouldn't make a difference because you would still go through netherrack sifting just to get yourself the gold ore chunks and the not the gold ore, the nether quartz ore chunks and the sphalerite ore chunks. Sphalerite is important because when you process it, so when you crush it, and then earlier on there's multiple ways to get it, but very early on you're going to crush it, right, and you're going to centrifuge the sphalerite dust itself, so you have a chance of getting tiny piles of gallium dust. And gallium is important because that is once again, you guessed it, 4 circuits. It's comprised of a large part of various circuit microcrafting recipes, and gallium, the ingot itself, right, is used for it can be alloyed to make vanadium gallium, which is actually used for IV level or LUV level circuits in microcrafting. So gallium is, I'm not sure if you guys ran into pain, if you're playing this pack, you ran into issues with it yet, but gallium will pop up as an occasional thorn. It has in my playthrough. To be honest, I've ran out of gallium like 4 times, but I've never ran out of osmium. Maybe that's partially because that I've never bothered automating lava. So maybe that's just one way to identify differences in the playstyle. That's where all the ores come from, right? That's where most of my ores come from in the pack. Let me go turn these off right now because, to be honest, I don't need these things anymore, right? I have more than enough power. So what does that feed into? As you can see, my ME system is almost, these are all 64K storage drives. Some of them are full. I'm actually kind of caught off guard by how little I had to use for this pack. You didn't need a lot. I did need to have one drive almost full for the ME fluid storage cells. And that was in addition when having these large banks of black hole tanks. Kind of the same thing here. I do have a black hole controller of like 10 of the most commonly used items, just because, you know, why would I, at this point, might as well just have black hole controllers handle it. And these are connected by a storage bus into the system. There isn't a lot of volume going in and out, so that's why this is not very laggy when I use storage buses on the black hole controllers. But if I had to use, like, if for some reason coal was just a high throughput item, it would go into my system and go out 20 different places, then I would actually highly consider probably just storing it in my system and not using a storage bus. And kind of the same thing, I just had extra buffers left over after putting iron ingot, tin ingots, and glowstone dust into black hole controllers. Now, what do I actually do with most of the ore processes? Well, it mostly varies. The vast majority of them, I actually slam into this multi-smelter. And this kind of looks ridiculous, right? Like, why the hell does this thing have fusion coil blocks? Well, let me describe to you the multi-smelter and what my plans were for it. But once again, I said I don't really care about ore doubling for like 90% of the ores in this pack. I just slam it inside the multi-smelter and we're good to go. So a multi-smelter, it's a multi-block. As you guys can probably tell, I'm having it share walls and hatches. This is how it is. Looks like a normal 3x3. It's kind of a smaller version of your first electric blast furnace, kind of the ones that I have over here. But these things have different little variants. First of all, they're shorter by 1 block. Second of all, they can also take attributes of how efficient they are from fusion coil. So electric blast furnaces, let's just describe both of them right now. If you're not familiar, electric blast furnaces both use coils just like multi-smelters, except the coil depends on what their heating capacity is. As you can see inside the actual inside the tooltip, this base heating capacity is 1800. If I look up coils, you can see all the different types of coils and how hot they go. Fusion coil is one of the highest. Multi-smelters, they get a different bonus because the hotter a blast furnace gets, the higher and better materials it can smelt and create. That's it. That's the only thing that heat is related to a blast furnace. Whereas having higher coils and multi-smelter make it work better. And let me show you what it means by work better, right? So let's do cobblestone. And so let's just throw some cobblestone in here. If I had, I could throw a stack in, and look, it eats up the whole entire stack. But actually, let me show you how much it actually uses up, because it uses up 4 stacks. If you saw that, it just ate up those 4 stacks like it was nothing. It'll consume and smelt these 4 stacks, then output them after it's done processing. And another part about the fusion coil that I talked about is that it also offers an energy discount, right? So at the max level, it'll take 4 stacks. What the level means is how much it'll use. So this is at level 1. So that means it'll take 16 items at a time and process 16 items at a time. So when you're using something like HSSG coils, it'll take 2 stacks at a time and burn 2 stacks at a time. It won't wait until there's 2 stacks worth of smeltables. As soon as it sees something valid, it'll suck them up. And you actually are incentivized to use the largest bus you possibly can to get the biggest variety, because if these are all filled up with single items, it'll suck up all those single items right away. Now, fusion coils, are the highest tier, and it also says they have an energy discount of 8. Clarifying what that means is that, look here, even though this is actually at HV, because it says HV at the top, I'm actually running it off of an MV advanced steam turbine, right? So, oopsies. Advanced steam turbine right there. So I don't even need to have HV to run this thing. That's what I thought was really incredible. It's super EU efficient. It's super overkill. You do not need fusion coils. I think I actually got through most of the pack on HSSG coils. I upgraded these things like twice. Even Cupro, I would not judge anyone if they go through the whole entire pack with just Cupro nickel coils on their multi-smelter. I think they're completely fine with that. All right, so let's go now next to the next part, which is electric blast furnaces. So just like multi-smelters and how they work is that they also take coils. I think I covered that already. I mean, there's really not much to say about blast furnaces, right? They just they're your giant EU consumers. Until you get to fusion reactors, the amount of EU consumed, oh yeah, those turbines do look weird. More on that later. Once again, plasma turbines, I'll describe them more later. But focusing on what I have this huge wiring requirement here, there's a reason for it, because electric blast furnaces, geez man, they are the EU gates of the pack. They might as well be the modern day mass fabricators just because of what they do. They just take a lot of EU. You could call them as EU sinks. And what I said earlier is that these things you kind of want to run constantly. I have, so each of these small setups right here, the smaller blast furnaces, there's 4 blast furnaces per section, and then there's 4 per chunk, right? So also, if you haven't noticed in my base, I have this chisel stone which delineates where a chunk border is, so that's just easier reference for me when I build around the base. You also want to kind of avoid having multi-blocks cross over into one chunk into another. That's just the general GregTech things. It's not always a problem, and sometimes it might even actually be a myth in 1.12.2. But you know, I'm not gonna be that person who tries to bust that myth and ruins my world doing so. So I just play it safe and try to make sure all my multi blocks fall within at least one chunk and do not cross chunk borders. Now, going back to this, all underneath here you can see I have cables. I occasionally use stairs so I can access the export bus. Import bus, output buses I don't really need to access to, so I just normally have an import bus pulling from the output bus, an AE import bus pulling from the GregTech electric blast furnace output bus. Yeah, so I have 32 of these. If I had to describe my order, I started off with 1, right, as most people do. Then I scaled it up to 4 when I was around MV HV era, and I scaled it up to 16 when I was in EV, and I scaled it up to 32 when I got to LUV, because I wanted to really started getting a lot more items, and it varies, right? Some of them are tungsten steel, some of them is enriched naquita. In fact, the majority at one point was enriched naquita. Some of them are let's see here. Let's see, look, all these new enriched naquita, lutetium, normal naquita, chrome, and so forth. The best way I could describe it is that all of these do not have hatches and gas. Only this one here with the superconducting coils have actual hatches, because here is that you'll be making titanium tetrachloride. I mean, you'll be using titanium tetrachloride combined with magnesium to get yourself hot titanium ingots. So that's the main way of getting titanium. Tungsten steel, kind of the same thing. You just have to alloy instead of actually using a hatch. I had it here somewhere. Yep, you just have to combine tungsten and steel. Now, one thing I want to note is that all of these have transformers. I'll go more in detail later about how voltages work in terms of transforming up and down. But long story short, you have about ZPM coming out of that way. Because if I take... Ooh, I don't have any more frames, do I? I do not. So basically, that's a ZPM transformer here. So this is actually receiving from a lot of plasma turbines. So it's receiving a lot of power from various plasma turbines. I think I have 16 working total here. And then I have another 10 surrounding that fusion reactor. And then I have another 3 powering the fusion reactor fuels. I have 2 more here, and then I have 1 more there. But this is outputting about ZPM power. And what happens is that this one is actually ludicrous voltage. So this specific blast furnace, this is the big daddy. This actually handles all the long stuff. I didn't have a need to make more than one. But if I needed to make osmiridium or naquadah alloy, this would be the blast furnace to make it. Right now it's dealing with naquadaria or naquadria, because look at this, 2,637 seconds. Each ingot almost takes 40 fucking minutes, man. I know I said the F word, not advertiser friendly, not PG friendly. I never claimed to be, but that's, and most people will complain like, oh my God, that's bad game design. I mean, you can still overclock it, right? You can still overclock it. You just need to dump more power. I kind of like that scalability. Plus, most people choose not to overclock it. I know people out there that'll I'm just going to chunk load it and do whatever. So more power to them, however they decide to do it. I decided that, nah, hell no, I'm not waiting that long. Another thing is that, once again, this has various types of fluid hatches. I have argon in here because you need argon really to make osmiridium, which requires 32k EU per tick, even though it only takes 25 seconds. So, right, this block of silicon and naquadah to make silicon dope monocrystalline silicon boules. Same exact thing. I just use it in this type of electric blast furnaces. So you want to have multiple blast furnaces that are dedicated to various gases or various liquids. Like I know you also need another one for helium, because you want to use helium to make glowstone doped silicon boules inside a blast furnace, as well as also making your osmiridium ingots, right? Or engraved crystal chips. Same exact thing. And yeah, that's about it about blast furnaces. I mean, they're simple, man. Just give them a crap ton of energy and then you're good to go. Actually, okay, so let me go into detail about the transformers. So here we have a ludicrous voltage transformer that takes, here we go, ludicrous voltage transformer. This thing is actually transforming down, right? So what it does is that it takes ZPM. Oh, it takes LUV. It takes LUV, right? So each one of these blast furnaces has an EV input hatch, right? And remember what I said, that don't process enriched naquadah at EV? Well, the nice part is that when you have plasma turbines and a fusion reactor, you have so much energy coming out of the ass, it doesn't really matter what you do. So more power to you. So I'm stepping down multiple times. As you can see here, this is kind of the reason why I decided to create these blast furnaces in batches of 4. And I do want to take credit, because this was some proper planning that you had to make ahead of time, and something you actually would not know if you're a complete GregTech newbie, is that you are going to need a lot of energy. And these energy and the voltage scaling, it scales by powers of 4 and powers of 2. So as much as possible, you kind of want to group all your processes so it accommodates that level of math. So right, you know, this is 16 blast furnaces in clumps of 4, so I can easily output 4 amps of EV via an insane voltage transformer. That ZPM transformer outputs, sorry, that's a ludicrous voltage transformer. I'm crazy. That's a ludicrous voltage transformer that outputs ludicrous voltage into this. Oh wait, no, yeah. So that's a ZPM. I'm actually correct. I'm too smart for my own good, apparently. Okay, Minecraft music. Let's calm you down a little bit. So what happened is that you have this ZPM voltage transformer, and ZPM once again is 131k. So it's transferring down. It takes 1 worth of ZPM, 131k voltage ZPM packets, transform this down to 4 packets, and superconductor wire, which is this white hot thing that you see, can take 4 amps and has 0 loss per block. So it takes that. So this is all this part right here. If I had more time, I would spray can this, or if I had better flying, I would spray can this to show it to be like yellow, orange, or something, to show that this is a ludicrous voltage line, because you can also spray can various cables. But unfortunately, there is no covered cable variant recipe of this superconductor cables. All right, minor rant here. There are no covered cables. There are no covered cables or insulated superconductor cable recipes. I asked why the pack dev, and his reply was that it's useless to have this insulation. I mean, it's not useless to have it as insulation, right? Like, first there's the painting, so you can have visual visual confirmation at what's traveling through the line. Second of all, and this is the big one that really annoys me, is because of this. When you have that high amount of voltage going through your actual unexposed wires, it's an insta kill. It's an auto kill. It's just a giant crit, which incredibly pisses me off, because I've died so many times to my own dumb cables, and they're like, but Viral, it's a balancing mechanic, because there should be one drawback. No, there shouldn't be. That's not how it works. There shouldn't be a drawback. Just make this an expensive recipe. That's literally that would follow with the progression of GregTech, right? Just give this one high polymer. Make it like, I don't know, a combination of polytetrafluoroethylene with styrene butadiene rubber with silicon rubber. That's fine. Like, make it require that. Make it require nitrogen plasma or something like that. Just make sure it has an expensive recipe that requires a form of complex automation to build it, and serious infrastructure. And second of all, they're just like, well, it's not pointless to have zero insulation because it's already lossless. The reason why is because loss doesn't even matter. ZPM cables, right? ZPM cables, there's no point in covering them. Sure, they have a loss of 2 blocks, but in order to see a significant amount of loss, I would have to stretch this cable 500 blocks, right? My base is 80 blocks max. So there's no way that loss when you're at a ZPM voltage even matters. Like, these turbines are outputting 20k EU per tick. Right? To see a significant amount of loss is irrelevant. It's almost microscopic. Loss is important early on when you're working with dinky ass little tin cables, small copper cables. But once you start getting into EV, even loss is not much of a factor. So I don't buy it that it's pointless to not insulate these. It's going to avoid a big frustration with people just trying to focus on automation of the pack, and it's also going to avoid a lot of frustration with it's just going to avoid a lot of frustration. That's just my big critique. It's not pointless at all, and I just think it's actually kind of just bad game design to not have that covered cable accessible. All right, but that's about it. At least one benefit is that mobs spawn on transformers, so occasionally while I'm walking around here, I'll see a bunch of rotten flesh on the ground or a bunch of skeleton bones, because the skeletons step off the transformer and get automatically fried. All right, so that covers the EBFs. You know what, let me actually go into a little bit more detail about how these EBFs work and how the energy hatches work. So each EBF here, and when I say EBF, I mean electronic blast furnace, has one energy input hatch. But it says here that it can actually accept 4096 EV. And you're probably wondering, if you're new to GregTech, why is that? Isn't EV actually 2048? Well, the secret is in the tooltip. And if you don't know what's going on, you can always look at the tooltip. GregTech has pretty good documentation in JEI and in the tooltip. And what it shows there is that it can take 2 amps of EV. So that's why it says it could take up to 4096 EU per tick. And this is way beyond this if you're probably watching, but one thing that most players get stuck on is when they want to make aluminium, right? Because aluminium says that it requires 120 EU per tick in 1 amp. This is where I take it back. GregTech documentation is a little bit lacking. Also, there's a funny JEI border conflict here because it goes right through it. But as you can see, it's not really 1 amp. The blast furnace only needs 120 EU per tick to process aluminium. So there are multiple ways to deliver that. You can slap on an LUV input hatch, but that will overclock the recipe. So instead of taking 120 EU per tick, once you put on an ludicrous voltage input hatch, it'll probably require something around like 30,000 EU per tick. However, you can also have each electric blast furnace can have more than one energy input hatch. So if you're trying to figure out early on, how the hell do I get enough power to my blast furnace? That's easy. You just have to make 2 energy input hatches that are LV, because that can take up to 2 amps of low voltage. So that's 64 EU per tick per input hatch, right? So you have 2 of those, and there you go. Bam. Your electric blast furnace is strong enough to handle 120 EU per tick. You just needed 2 input hatches. And And that's what I like about GregTech multi-blocks. They just have that level of modularity. I mean, it's complex, but it's not complex for the sake of complexity. It's complex for the sake of flexibility and the awesome wall sharing, right? That you can share walls. They cannot share hatches. I have to stress that again, but they can share walls, so you can even save up on resources because you don't need to make 64 coils, right? Because if each blast furnace normally takes up 16 coils, because it's 2 layers of 8 coils each, it can actually only takes up 42 coils, because this is 2 layers of 21. So you're that's like 66% efficiency. And coils are usually the most expensive part of the electric blast furnace because you need to progressively upgrade those. All right. So that's it. Pardon me for the rant on the superconductors, but I feel like that had to be said, and I just want to, that was like crossing a little bit into game design, but that was just my opinion. It really just serves no purpose not to have that superconductor cable recipe even be available. Like it's just it's a piss poor excuse to not have it. All right. So that does about most of my early ore processing. Next part, guys, I think we'll get there. We're going to talk about the fusion reactors and all the other setups. So I'll see you in a bit.